Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Aquarium Online Academy. My name is Amanda, and I'm coming to you live from the Aquarium of the Pacific in Long Beach, California. And I'm excited that you decided to join us today. We are going to be exploring the deep sea and talking a little bit about bioluminescence. But I'd like to invite you to participate along with us today. If you have a phone nearby and would like to text in any questions that you have, I would love to answer them during our program where we're all together. So you can text any questions to the number on the screen, 562-286-1838. If you are watching this at a later time, you are welcome to, if you have questions that come up, to email us any questions that you might have. And then when we are available, one of our educators will happily respond to those questions. So you can email those at live@lbaop.org. So you can email us and wait for a later response, or if you'd like to talk to us during the program, you can just text us 562-286-1838. So I hope you're prepared with some questions and you have some things that you're wondering about, because I would love to let you help guide this program. But there is so much that we can explore and discover together about the deep sea. So right behind me is our blue cavern exhibit. It's kind of a deep exhibit for us here, but it's only 27 feet deep. So not as deep as what we're really going to be focusing on today. But my friend Allie is in the studio with me, and she'll be changing the images that you see on the screen behind you. So the two of us are doing this program together. So I am going to ask at the end, if there are teachers out there, if you could text in any numbers of students that you have that are watching our program, so we have an idea of how far our reach is for those who are participating along with us. So anyhow, what are some things that you know about the deep sea, or that you'd like to know about? Maybe some things you've heard or you're wondering about. What are the characteristics of the deep sea? So if you were to go out to the ocean and look out, it looks like this amazing expanse of just water. And that's great, but we are so limited by just looking at the surface. If we just looked at the surface of the water, we wouldn't see a whole lot. Or would we? Actually, have you ever been to the beach at night? Have you ever heard, or maybe you've seen this perhaps, have you ever looked at the water at night and you've noticed that it looks like it's just kind of glowing a little bit? Well, that's kind of interesting, isn't it? We actually have a picture. We had an event here, a couple years ago, that one of my former coworkers had a camera, and she took a picture of these waves that appear to be glowing. And yeah, we have a still image of it right here. And this is a picture right here in Long Beach. So this boat is going through the water, and it looks like the waves are glowing this blue glow. Why is that? Well, you might think, what does that have to do with the deep sea? You're talking about the surface of the water. Well, there's something that happens at the deep sea that sometimes we can see at the surface as well. And not all the time, but when we get these lucky events that happen, we can see that. But I'd like you to think about what it is that might be causing that water to glow. And do you see it glowing everywhere? Is it glowing over here? Well, not really. You can see the reflection of the light from the surface of the water, but that's not coming from the water. But this glow seems to be coming from underneath. What's happening at this part of the water that isn't happening over there? Well, you can see the boat is moving. So we've got some movement going through the water. So as the water is moving, we're seeing this glow. Just like if you've ever been at the beach and the waves are crashing. Maybe we can even show you a video of what that looks like. When the waves are crashing at the beach and where that little, like the white foam sort of area is, seems to be glowing. Well, that's not just your eyes imagining it, or your mind, but take a look at this. Do you see a little bit of that blue coloration in these waves? Of course, it's dark, so our quality, our light quality isn't great here. But as these waves are coming in, you might see some of the white, but occasionally you'll see the blue. Now, we have a little bit of a lull here, but we'll get another good wave coming in, but you can start to see it right back over here. So watch those waves. Wow, they seem to be glowing. So if you have some thoughts on what that is, or again, if you're just texting in questions that you'd like to know about, feel free to do so. But those little things that are making the water to grow, that's actually those are done by living organisms. And what is it that allows those living organisms to make that glow? Well, it is bioluminescence. So bioluminescence is a chemical reaction that actually happens inside of living creatures. So bio for life. and the luminescence, like the light, the glowing. So it's light that's made by living creatures. And it is pretty phenomenal that they can do this. What they do is they take something inside their body, a protein called luciferin, and then they have this enzyme called luciferase, all these crazy words. And when they are combined together with oxygen in the water, they can emit light. And it's what we call cool light or cold light because it's not emitting a bunch of heat like many of the lights that we use or light bulbs that we have. And so we actually have a little experiment that we can do. Well, we took a video of it and we showed it. We can show it to you of some little tiny organisms. And these organisms that I'm talking about are a type of plankton. And this right here is a close-up view of what this plankton looks like. This plankton is a little tiny animal, and it is called an osteocod. Now, this osteocod can emit light. It uses luciferin and luciferase in its body, and then it can emit light. And they're also called deep sea fireflies. So what we can do is we can take dried out osteocods, which aren't alive anymore, and if we kind of break them up and release some of the proteins, the luciferin in their body, luciferase, and we add a little bit of water to it, we can actually cause them to grow too. So we did a little video of this, and we'll show you what it looks like inside this little dish. And these little tiny specks, it doesn't look like anything really, does it? But those are little tiny osteocods, little tiny plankton. And what we do is we added some water to it. We turned the lights off, and then we added some water, and look at how it glows. So the oxygen in the water was reacting with the luciferin and luciferase and causing bioluminescence to happen. And this is happening even when this animal is no longer alive. We were able to react that or cause that reaction to happen. Now, someone asked, have there been any questionable or weird findings when going to the deep sea? Well, yes, there have. In fact, you don't even need to find them going to the deep sea because sometimes people are lucky enough to find things recently, even within the last year. You may have heard of the finding that someone found at, was it Crystal Cove, I think, in California, just a little south of where we are here. Someone discovered walking along the beach this amazing fish that is known for living in the deep sea, and it's called a Pacific football fish. And it is a type of fish that maybe you're familiar with it if you saw Finding Nemo, that has this little lure at the top of its head, and it creates bioluminescence at the top. And that bioluminescence, this is a type of anglerfish right here, not the same kind we saw, but this has a big body. So the fish that they found had a big body, and then it had this lure. And the lure that they found on the Pacific football fish had this crazy, it almost looked like spaghetti at the end of the arm. And that can bioluminesce and create light that attracts fish over to it. So bioluminescence can be used for animals to help them draw their prey over so that they can eat. But can you think of any other uses that bioluminescence might be helpful for? We saw how the boat going through the water, that movement was creating a disturbance in the water. And that is actually what was causing these little tiny plankton to fire off their bioluminescence. Because when these tiny plankton, we call them dinoflagellates, that have, we'll look at that picture again. When these dinoflagellates are kind of stirred up, when motion gets them going, it causes them to release that bioluminescence, and it can be a distraction. So if you're a hungry predator, you're going to go over to something, but all of a sudden you see this flash of light, it kind of takes your mind away, and you focus on that flash of light and not necessarily the animal that you're trying to eat. So it can be a way that they can divert attention away from themselves, actually, to say like, oh, look at this shocking thing, and I want to confuse you so you don't eat me. Now, there's other reasons that animals might bioluminesce as well. So we talked about being a distraction, like maybe if I poof this bioluminescence out this direction, then you won't be so interested in following me and eating me, and I can distract you. But there's also some that say, hey, I'm going to light up so that if there's something else around that's bigger that might have a really big appetite, maybe they'll eat the thing that's trying to eat me. Now, you might think that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but we discovered that there is a type of jelly, and we call this a burglar alarm, where the jelly will start to glow if they get disturbed. If an animal is trying to eat them, this jelly will create this bioluminescence all around them. And they've found that it works like a little flashing neon light, like a diner. Like, we are open. There is really great food to get here because look, something's trying to eat me. So is there anyone out there who's hungrier, who wants to eat something bigger than even me? Come on over, and then you can eat that thing trying to eat me. So it's really interesting how these animals have these amazing ways of avoiding being eaten by things, either by distracting them or calling other animals to come on over to them. Now, they can also use their light in a way to, well, we mentioned distraction, but one of my favorite examples of this is the flashlight fish. Have you ever heard of a flashlight fish before? Flashlight fish have this little flap right below their eye, and they start to swim in one direction with their light on, and then they turn it off and they swim the other direction. So if a predator is coming after a flashlight fish, they see the light going this way and they start to chase them, and then all of a sudden the animal turns its light off and they go the other way, but the animal chasing them doesn't know and keeps going that way. So I don't know. I think it's pretty interesting how they can use their bioluminescence to distract and to help evade predators. So some of the things that they have found are weird ways that animals can bioluminesce, and they help us wonder, like, why do they do it that way? And we are, oh, here's a great picture of our flashlight fish. So we actually have some here at the aquarium on display too, but you can see that little patch, and that's actually caused not by bioluminescence happening that the flashlight fish is doing, but because of bacteria that live in the flashlight fish, and they keep that bacteria all right there, and then they can cause a flap to go over it and cover it up, so they kind of turn that light off, and then they can move that flap up and down. But those are not their eyes. They almost look like little glowing eyes, but those are not eyes. Their eyes are right above that. But those are those little lights that those flashlight fish can use. So bioluminescence is common in the ocean, not just in the deep sea, but also it comes up to the surface sometimes. Sometimes they also use their bioluminescence to help them camouflage and blend in. So if an animal's below them looking up at the surface, that lighter color, if they can light up and kind of glow on the underside, it helps them to blend in and camouflage with the surface. And then if something's above them looking down, they don't see that light because it's only on the underside of their body. So there's different types of bioluminescence in the ocean and at all different depths. So other weird and interesting findings that they might find in the deep sea. Well, you might be surprised at how many animals can bioluminesce. We've got all sorts of fish. We have jellies. There are worms. There are shrimp that will actually release that poof of bioluminescence as well, like this right here. So they're using that in a way to distract things. But maybe you've heard of an animal. It doesn't necessarily bioluminesce. It's called a blobfish. Have you heard of a blobfish before? Well, what's interesting about blobfish is if you bring them up to the surface, they look like a big blob. They look kind of silly looking. But when they're actually in their home, they don't look so blobby. Can you figure out why that would be? What is different about the deep sea compared to the surface of the water? Think about if you've ever been swimming. You've gone to the bottom of a swimming pool. As you've dived down, as you dove below the surface of the water, did you notice anything happening with your ears? Did you feel that pressure? Well, as you dive deeper, the pressure on your body is increasing. And as you go deeper and deeper in the ocean, it gets greater and greater to the point that a person could not just put on scuba gear and dive to the bottom of the ocean because their body would be crushed underneath all that pressure. So how do we explore the deep sea? How are we able to withstand the pressure? Have we ever been to the bottom of the deepest part of the ocean? Do you know what the deepest part of the ocean is? I bet there's someone out there who probably has their hand raised in class right now saying, I know what it is. It is the Mariana Trench, and it's the Challenger Deep, the deepest part of the Mariana Trench, and here we have this wonderful device that helps us to explore it. If you're not sure what this is, it looks like this weird, I don't know, like robotic thing. That's pretty much what it is. It's called an ROV. ROV is a remotely operated vehicle. And so you can have people sitting at the surface of the ocean in a boat that are controlling it almost like a video game. And they can control and see how far, how deep it can go. They can get samples on information on the pressure, on what's there. They can have cameras that are looking out and getting information on seeing that whole environment. But we can't just go free diving down there or even with scuba gear to see it because of the pressure on our bodies. However, there have been people who have been able to get inside another vessel and go down to the bottom of the deep sea. But these are the types of things that an ROV, a remotely operated vehicle, can do. Notice these little robotic arms. You were talking about a video game, like a little joystick, that they're able to control these, and they can get samples of the animals and the organisms that are living in the deep sea. In fact, look at this stuff. What do you think that looks like? What does that remind you of? Well, these things are a type of a deep sea coral, basically, is what we're getting a little sample of. And these little organisms, this is actually made up of a whole bunch of little teeny tiny organisms. They have little tiny polyps growing on them. But these are living in the deep sea where we don't normally get to see them. And so these ROVs can help us explore by giving us cameras and by allowing us to collect these samples so that we can bring them up to the surface and discover more about them. However, I did mention some people have actually gone to the bottom of the deepest part of our ocean. And so here you can see a manned submersible. This is where we put people inside of it and they can control it and they can see things with their own eyes. Well, the first time that 2 people went down to the bottom part of the ocean, guess what they saw? Not a whole lot. It took them a really long time to get down there, but all the propellers and everything, once they landed on the bottom of the ocean floor, they said it was so thick they could barely see anything at all. So they could see a lot of things as they were going down to the bottom, and then they could see a lot as they were coming up. But how long do you think it takes to get down to the deepest part of the ocean? Well, do you know how deep it is? The deepest part of the ocean, the Mariana Trench and the Challenger Deep, is about 36,000 miles. So 36,000, I'm sorry, feet, not miles. 36,000 feet is how deep it is. And so it is really hard to travel all that distance in a safe way. It takes 4 hours. It took them 4 hours. Victor Vescovo is actually an explorer who was able to dive down, and here's Victor Vescovo along with the first woman who has ever been to the bottom of the deepest part of our ocean. And though what's really special about her is not only did she go to the deepest part of the ocean, she has also walked in space. So she has the title of the most vertical woman in the world, which is pretty awesome. She's been to the deepest part of our planet and also the farthest point out above our Earth, out in space. So that's pretty impressive that she's been able to be in both of these environments. So her name is Dr. Kathy Sullivan. And so this is Dr. Sullivan and Victor Vescovo, the explorer, who have been to the deepest part of our planet. But up until 2019, I think that's when he was the first one to be able to go down and make that dive and then do it again. He was the first person who's ever been there twice. Now he's been there, I don't know, 7 or 8 or 9 times or something like that, maybe even more. And so it's really exciting to think that we are now living in a time where we can explore things that we've never been able to explore before. And we now have so many people who have been to the deep sea. 13 people have now been to the deepest part of our ocean. And that's really been in the last few years, since 2019, because up before 2019, only 3 people had been to the bottom of the deep sea. So that's really exciting. And if this is an area of interest to you, if you're thinking about exploring the ocean, there are many opportunities. Now with technology, we're learning how to use technology to help us explore a little bit better. And there are lots of opportunities, especially if you like video games. Great way to explore. Okay, so we've learned that there's bioluminescent animals in the ocean. We've learned that it's got a lot of pressure. And we know it's really, really dark down there. Why is it so dark? Well, the sunlight can't travel very far. So as the rays of the sun come in, it kind of disappears color by color because sunlight is made up of all these different colors, all the colors of the rainbow. And then as they have these different wavelengths to give them different colors, those colors travel not very far. Red has a very short wavelength. So if you're looking at a red wavelength from the sun, it's not going to travel very far, which means anything that's red in the bottom of the ocean, it's never going to get that red wavelength to reach it. And so we'll never be able to see it as red with our eyes. It will actually blend in and look black in the ocean. So That's why we've discovered many animals that live in the deep sea are colored red. And you might think, well, why would that be? Because they would really stick out, wouldn't they? But they can't stick out if no light is getting down there. And so it's the first color that kind of disappears as you go diving under the ocean. If you've ever been snorkeling somewhere, I know the first time I went snorkeling, I was surprised at how it wasn't as bright and colorful as I thought it would be, because it was down below the surface of the water where not all the sunlight was getting through as well. And so if you were to shine a light on them, then you'd be able to see their color. But the sunlight just doesn't travel as well in the water as it does out in the air. And so sometimes the animals don't look the same color underwater. So we have the wavelengths that are traveling through the water, but not getting very far. And we know that we need sunlight to live and to survive. In fact, the trees that are all around us are getting that sunlight, and they are creating oxygen for us to breathe. Well, that happens in the ocean too. There are plants and there's algae in the ocean that's creating oxygen, that's using the sunlight. But what about the organisms at the deepest part of the ocean? How are they getting oxygen if there's no sunlight that can reach them? Well, there's something else that happens. There are organisms that are down in the bottom of the ocean that are creating oxygen, but they're not doing it through photosynthesis using the sunlight. They're using chemosynthesis. So chemosynthesis allows these organisms to use the chemicals that are coming up from the bottom of the earth, from the bottom of the ocean, and using those to create oxygen for the other organisms that are living at the bottom of the sea. So what do you notice in this picture? Notice it says hot magma down here. You think of magma, you think of volcanoes, right? Well, this is the magma in the earth. As it comes up and it reaches the seawater, well, we get these amazing black smokers. They can be white smokers too, but we get these, what we call deep sea vents. So there are vents in the ocean that are kind of this pathway between what's below the earth and what's out in the ocean. And we get these little things that we call chimneys, because these are deposits of different chemicals coming from under the earth, from the magma, and they create these little chimneys that release this really, really warm, hot water. Because again, if we're not getting any sunlight, what is there to actually warm the ocean up? And how can things survive in such cold water? That water can be very, very cold. It can be anywhere from 1 to 3 degrees Fahrenheit, or not Fahrenheit, Celsius, which is about 34 to 39 degrees Fahrenheit. And so that water, and here they're showing 28 degrees, so negative 2 degrees Celsius. And how cold that is. Well, this really warm water, look at the number there, 663 degrees Fahrenheit. That's really, really hot. And so it's coming up, and it is actually warming this area for other organisms that live around it. And these chemicals are being released, and these organisms can create oxygen and life using those chemicals. So it's pretty interesting. You have black smokers and white smokers depending on the types of chemicals that are creating them. So when you look at these different vents, the seawater where it's meeting the magma, you can get deposits of barium, calcium, silicon. Those are the ones that create the white smokers. And then the black smokers are deposits of iron sulfide. So depending on what you're seeing coming out, whether it looks like it's white or whether it looks like it's black, it has to do with the chemicals. So many interesting things to explore and discover in the deep sea. But what are some of the questions that you're wondering about? We have some time together in the next 6 minutes before our program's over to answer any questions, or if there's any observations that you would like to share about these animals, we would love to hear them. And you can text us. Again, we'll put that number up on the screen at 562-286-1. Is it 1838? 1838. So there it is, 286-1838. So feel free to text in any questions that you might have about the deep sea. So when I mentioned pressure, think about how much pressure we talked about feeling it in your ears. But one thing I didn't mention is that pressure at the bottom of the deep sea is up to 16,000 pounds per square inch. That is, imagine having that much weight on 1 square inch of your body, like the size of a postage stamp or something. It'd be like an elephant standing on a postage stamp, and all that pressure on that one part of your body. And at the deepest part of the sea, that amount of pressure is like 1,000 times greater than what we experience at the surface at sea level. So the conditions are very, very different. We would not be able to survive in the deep sea, but the animals that live there have some incredible adaptations. Being able to bioluminesce, being able to have bodies that are more fluid so that pressure isn't impacting them as much. And here's one of those beautiful fluid creatures right here. This is called a flower hat jelly. So the flower hat sea jelly can actually not just, I don't know that it's bioluminescent, but actually fluorescent. So fluorescence and bioluminescence are a little bit different. Bioluminescence is where they're creating their own light. Fluorescence is where they're emitting a light when something else is shining on them. So they need some other sort of influence to reach them, and then they can display a different color. But you will notice that this blue color is the most common color that you're going to see in the ocean. Remember how we said red tends to disappear? Many animals that are colored red in the ocean don't actually have the ability to even sense red wavelengths. And so they don't, if something was red in the ocean, they wouldn't be able to see it because they're so used to not needing to see the color red since it can't get down that deep. But yet blue is something that many animals in the ocean do have receptors for. So not every ocean animal sees all the same sorts of colors that we can see. They see, they're much more sensitive to blues and greens. And so those are the colors that we tend to see in the ocean. Here is another bioluminescent worm. And you can see, again, that common blue color that they have. So would these animals want to be bioluminescent all the time? Would they always want to be glowing? Or is there a reason that they might want to cover it up? What if you're a hungry animal and you eat a bioluminescent food? You find your food, it's all bright, you grab it and it goes into your stomach and it glows like some of the jellies. Jellies have bodies that are see-through, and if they are eating bioluminescent animals, it's going to make them light up all the more. Well, some jellies actually have a special little coating inside of them. So it's almost like a little patch where you can't see all this bioluminescent, these organisms that they're eating. So that's kind of cool. But animals can control how bioluminescent they are and when they're showing off that light and when they want to just kind of blend in. Now, we were talking again about the red light and how it's not very obvious. There is an animal that uses it almost like a flashlight under the water. And it has red receptors in its lights when other organisms don't. So they shine a red light so that they can see where they're going, but no one else notices that it's theirs. And it's one of the ways that they can help find their food. And that is the moose jaw. Let me double check. I think it's a moose jaw. Is it a dragonfish? I think it's just a moose jaw. So the moose jaw fish is a pretty interesting fish with those red, with the ability to see things with that red light. Now, someone was asking, is there a specific time that bioluminescence happens on the surface? Yes, I'm so glad you asked. And it's not a very predictable time, but it happens to be when the water, the nutrients are upwelling from the water. And so there's a special amount of dinoflagellates, which are these organisms that are creating this bioluminescence. When there is an abundance or a bloom of these organisms, it tends to be when it's just the right conditions of the upwelling of the water where we're seeing animals that sometimes might be living down at the bottom and they're up at the surface. It is not very predictable though. And so when we find a bioluminescent show of these organisms, it's exciting and scientists want to get out there, and we don't know how long it will last. Sometimes it lasts for maybe a week. Sometimes it might last a little bit longer than that, a couple weeks. Sometimes it might only be for a few days, but it tends to be when there's just the right amount of upwelling from under the water that's coming to the surface. But we're still trying to get a good handle on it. So yes, there are specific times that it happens, but it's not a predictable time, and it's not like, oh, well, every time, every month, or these are the months that you're going to expect to see it. It's not as predictable as that. But it is exciting whenever we do get the opportunity to see them. So thank you for that question. But I hope you've enjoyed exploring the deep sea and talking about bioluminescence a little bit and realizing that it's all over the ocean. Many animals in the ocean can bioluminesce. The ones we're most familiar with at the surface, though, many of them, we only see the surface level, but there's so much below the ocean, the deepest parts, even in the trenches of the ocean. But some of those come up to the surface and we get to see them, like at these dinoflagellates at night when they're glowing at the water's surface at the top. So I hope that if you're interested in exploring the deep sea, you might want to consider checking out nautiluslive.org. Nautiluslive.org is a way that you can actually watch some deep sea explorers as they are exploring the ocean in their ROVs. And you can, or with their ROVs, you can get different camera views on your computer at home. So if you go to nautiluslive.org, you can watch these ROVs in the water. You can control what camera you're seeing out of. You can type in questions like, what was that fish that just swam by? And they will audibly answer you on the computer screen. And it's really exciting and really neat to do. So there is deep sea exploration going on, and you can actually be a part of it as it's happening. And so I hope that if you have any other questions, you'll contact us, and you can write us at live@lbaop.org. But have a wonderful day, everyone. And we hope to see you again another time. Bye.